Welcome back to my little channel. Yes, you see correctly, it's the United Nations. We're going to talk about the United Nations again today, or more to the point, the United Nations Refugee Agency, the UNHCR. Why are we going to talk about them? Well, I hope you'll find it interesting, though in all fairness, it made me angry a bit. We're going to talk about how UN officials are blocking Christian refugees in the Middle East from getting help while thousands of Muslims flood the West. Now, I have to admit, the title is rather incendiary. I mean, thousands of Muslims flooding the West, that's not a nice way of putting it. It's not that I disagree, it's that it's not put in a nice way. Why don't I disagree? Well, because I really think that it's not logical to have lots of Muslims coming to Europe because of unrest in the Middle East when there are Middle Eastern countries where they could still be in relative peace. These people share a culture, so it's easier for them to adapt and thrive than it would be in Europe. Funny enough, this is also true for the Christians, were it not for the small fact that Christians have a terrible life in these countries to begin with. Is that the case? Well, yes, because there are still countries where switching from being a Muslim to becoming a Christian is a crime. Christians are dhimmis, don't you know? They are second-rate civilians. If they are second-rate at all, let's be honest. But enough of that. This is not about anti-Islam or pro-Christianity or blah 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 like that. This is to once again show the incredible hypocrisy the United Nations seem to think is acceptable. According to CBN News, Muslim UN officials in Jordan blocked Christian Syrian refugees from getting aid from the United Nations Refugee Agency. Hassan, one of the refugees interviewed, told CBN News that Muslim UN camp officials knew that we were Muslim and became Christian, and they dealt with us with persecution and mockery. They didn't let us into the office. They ignored our requests. Okay, that's quite condemning, but it's only anecdotal. This mustn't happen a lot, surely. Well, we have a bunch of examples. And yes, okay, they're all stories, but still. You have this absurd situation where the scheme is set up to help Syrian refugees, and the people most in need, the Christians, who have been genocided, can't even get into the UN camps to get food. If you enter and say I'm a Christian or a convert, the Muslim UN guards will block you from getting in and laugh at you and even threaten you, according to Paul Diamond. Now, it's not weird that the UN soldiers in Jordan are predominantly Muslim, because the area is predominantly Muslim. That in itself shouldn't be an issue. But when these soldiers, these UN officials, decide that you're a Christian, therefore you don't deserve aid, well, then they no longer are the United Nations. Then they no longer try to protect everyone. And one could argue that this has been going on for quite some time, not just in the United Nations, let's be honest. Because if we look in Europe, Angela Merkel, several years ago, clearly stated that there are no refugees from the Ukraine, even though there is a civil war going on there. But most of these people are Christian, and apparently that's not good enough. So, yeah, there is this problem that Christian refugees from the Middle East, who are truly in danger there, let's be honest, aren't welcome at the United Nations. And when I first read this, well, as I said, it angered me. But then I had to fact check it because, let's be honest, one should always, even me. And then I found this. Let me see if I can show it to you really fast. Christian refugees unfairly kept out. Fact check post featured. Posted January 2017. President Donald Trump said Christians have been horribly treated by the refugee program and that it has been almost impossible for Syrian Christians to gain refugee status to enter the United States. And then, of course, it's Trump who said it, so he gave no evidence, and we're going to deny or doubt it. It's true that relatively few Christians have been accepted in the US as refugees, but officials at the United Nations Refugee Program say few Christians from Syria have registered seeking resettlement. Oh. So it may be very well true. And while there are several theories for why this is, no one is entirely certain why. And I'm like, so 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago now, they already recognized this. But they didn't look into the why. And this is funny because people then make it sound like Trump was lying. But a Pew Research Center, I'm going to highlight it a bit. A Pew Research Center analysis of the data from the State Department Refugee Processing Center found that there were 38, almost 39,000 Muslim refugees and 37 and a half Christian refugees. Oh, loads of hiccups now. Now, nearly half of all refugees resettled came from the Democratic Republic of Congo, Syria and Burma. And then that is supposed to mean that Trump was wrong. But if we then continue reading, Trump specifically cited the example of Syria. The US accepted 12,500 Syrian refugees, and the overwhelming majority of them were Sunni Muslims, according to data from the Refugee Process Center. Just 64 Syrian refugees admitted to the US, or less than 0.5%, were Christians in 2016. Do we really think that only 0.5% of the Syrians trying to escape the civil war that's going on are Christians? Because, as they say below that, Pew Research says roughly 5% of the population of Syria is Christian, where the CIA puts that around 10%. But I'm going to believe Pew, so let's say it's 5%. Now, if 5% of all the people in Syria are Christian, why only 0.5% is fleeing the country? We all saw the imagery of ISIS trading off Yazidi girls, or killing other Christians, or indeed killing other Muslims. Let's not be weird. I mean, there's a good reason for Muslims to flee, but there's equally, even more so I would say, a reason to flee from Christians, because they can't pretend to be Muslim. It's kind of funny because Christians are always being told that lying is a bad thing. Remember the New Testament, where Jesus had this problem with Judas. So yeah, Christians don't lie about their religion. Funny enough, Muslims can lie about their religions. It's even, applauded in the Quran. I don't go into that right now because that's not the point. The point is, the head of the Religious Freedom and Conservative Hudson Institute believes it is evident of de facto discrimination against Christians, Nina Shea. But Chris Boyan, a spokesperson for the United Nations, said, well, UNHCR staff simply does not discriminate. Well, you say, Chris Boyan says, not you say, Chris Boyan says, United Nations staff doesn't discriminate, but the facts say something else. And the funny thing is, according to Mr. Boyan, we don't fully know why there are fewer Christian refugees status within the UNHCR. But, well, we do. Especially if we then look at this article, which came, yesterday. And again, links will be provided, where they have several examples of UN officials preventing Christians from entering refugee camps. Oh no, not Christians that come to aid the refugees, but Christian refugees. And somehow, this is the new normal. I don't understand this. I don't understand how this can happen.